Hello, good evening. Assalamu alaikum. Okay. Hi, my name's Anwar Akhtar. I'm the director of The Samosa, and I would like to welcome everybody here this evening to, this is the last of 4 events that have been organised by the RSA, City University and The Samosa, looking at the history, heritage, culture and family ties between Britain, Pakistan and British Pakistanis. This programme, over 4 events, has attempted to discuss and understand the many links between British Pakistanis, Britain and Pakistan. So I'm delighted that we've got such an esteemed and lively panel with us this evening. Joining us are Michael Green, who is co-author of a book, Philanthrocapitalism, with Matthew Bishop. Philanthrocapitalism is a fascinating analysis of the impact and implications of the actions of donors such as the Bill Gates Foundation and the Warren Buffett Foundation, who are vastly increasing aid into the developing world and changing how those programs are delivered. The book also asks what impact these private donors are having and how their work can be integrated into the work of government agencies and government-led projects, and if governments need to change how they work to partner these philanthropists. Michael is London-based and has worked in aid and development for nearly 20 years. He was also head of communications at DFID and has worked with 3 Secretaries of State and led Britain's aid programmes in the Ukraine and in Russia. He's an economist by training and a graduate of the University of Oxford. Amina Salahuddin is Director of Fundraising and manages the UK charity Friends of a Citizen Foundation. She was born in Pakistan, grew up in Switzerland, where she achieved a Master's in Media and Journalism. Her career in London has seen her go from a senior position at a niche PR agency to fulfilling her long-term goal of being involved in the development sector and working on empowerment of underprivileged children in Pakistan through education. Asif Rangoonwala is both the chair of the British Pakistani Foundation and the Rangoonwala Foundation. He is a successful business entrepreneur with interests spanning food, property and sports. He is very involved in philanthropic activities through the Rangoonwala Foundation, established by his late father, Muhammad Ali Rangoonwala. As chairman, he helps the foundation provide vocational training, medical centres, libraries, educational facilities and other life-enhancing facilities. He's a fellow of the Duke of Edinburgh's Award, trustee of the Whitefield Development Trust, vice chairman of Indus Entrepreneurs and chairman of the World Memon Foundation. Hugh Mclean is director of the Soros Foundation, Open Society Education Programmes. Hugh joined the Education Support Programme in Budapest in 1999 and was associated with Open Society Foundation's education work in various capacities and has worked in Russia and in Pakistan. He moved to the UK in 2006 and has led on refining a new mission focus for the Education Support Programme. The programme has now become widely recognised and regarded in international education circles. Hugh also studied music and completed a postgraduate diploma in music and English language teaching. The Open Society is active in more than 60 countries around the world, and in a specific response to the flooding in Pakistan in 2010, the foundation gave a $5 million emergency grant to provide food, clean water, shelter and medical supplies. Razul Kareem is London and South Area Manager of Islamic Relief UK. He has been an active member of the community from an early age. He completed his BA Honours from the University of London. He joined Islamic Relief in 2008, starting as a fundraising officer, and has quickly risen through the ranks to his current position. He has achieved great results since joining and played a key role in the organisation's growth in the region and in increasing its income. He has travelled extensively and has participated in Islamic relief work in emergency response, project delivery evaluation and audit. Now, before we start, we're going to have some short video clips of the work of Islamic Relief and the Citizens Foundation, and then Michael Green is going to give an introduction. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Anwar, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a real pleasure to be here, one, to be on such a distinguished panel of experts about Pakistan, which I'm not. But it's also a pleasure to be talking about an issue that is both important and timely. Important because Pakistan is an important country. Not important for the reasons people often talk about, because of the bomb and because of its geostrategic importance, but important because it's a country with extraordinarily unfulfilled potential, a country that needs to serve its people much, much better, and there's a huge opportunity, I feel, in Pakistan. It's also timely, I think, as part of this series, talking about the role of diasporas in development. 2 weeks ago, Bill Gates made a presentation to the G20 countries talking about future ways of financing development. And one of his main recommendations, that wasn't much reported, but was a really important recommendation in his report, was that diasporas had a crucial role in financing development. And he made a number of recommendations about how that could be enhanced and more could be done about that. So diasporas are really moving to centre stage in the debate about development and the fight against poverty. So I think it's very timely that we're talking about that issue now. What I want to argue tonight is that there is a great opportunity for the Pakistani diaspora in the UK and globally to really take on the challenges that are confronting Pakistan at the moment. Those challenges, I think, are captured by the new Human Development Index report, where Pakistan was rated 145th out of 187 countries in the world, which is not very good. 40 million people in Pakistan, more than 20% of the population, live in grinding poverty on less than $1.25 a day. Adult literacy is 55%, which is not good, especially when you compare it to other countries that are poorer but doing better, such as Yemen, Nepal, or Uganda. The track record on education is absolutely shocking. 1 in 10 children born in Pakistan will not see their 5th birthdays, almost 1 in 10. And Pakistan has the dubious distinction of being one of only 4 countries in the world where polio is still endemic. So there are enormous development challenges. There's an enormous burden of poverty and underdevelopment that the people of Pakistan have to live under. And so who's responsible for sorting this out? Well, obviously, the primary responsibility must rest with the government of Pakistan. And I had a look at some numbers today. The total government expenditure on education in Pakistan is 2.6% of national income. Total public spending on healthcare in Pakistan is also 2.6% of national income. Compared to countries even much poorer, these are astonishingly low levels of public spending on basic public goods like health and education. And I think we can talk more later about the problems around revenue raising in Pakistan, the way public programs work, the leakage from public expenditure programs. But the starting point has got to be is that the government of Pakistan is not doing its job in providing basic services to its people. These levels of spending are shockingly low. These very low levels of public spending by the Pakistani government mean that aid forms a disproportionately large part of spending on poverty reduction in Pakistan. Total foreign aid to Pakistan last year was $1.7 billion, which comes out as about 1% of national income, which actually, compared to other developing countries, is not that much. But again, compared to such low levels of public expenditure, it means that aid plays a disproportionately important role in providing health and education services. About 1/5 of that money comes from the UK taxpayer. The British aid programme in Pakistan is running at about £200 million a year. And I should say that although I used to work with the British government, I'm not a spokesman for DFID tonight. I will just do what I can to explain from my own private perspective how I think the British government is tackling aid. Of that £200 million a year at the moment, some of it's going to humanitarian work, some of it's going to promote enterprise and wealth creation. But the vast majority is going to tackle the education crisis. And over between 2011 and 2015, the plan is to invest more than £600 million in education in Pakistan, with a goal of putting 4 million children into schools. I will just comment briefly at this stage that I do wonder, the scheme is to put most of that money through the public budgets, which does seem like a slightly leaky bucket to put the money in. I'm also slightly wondering why buying 6 million textbooks is going to really put 4 million children into school. So I have some questions about effectiveness. And I think this is one of the problems the official donors have, is that they are very much committed to working through government systems, which are often very poor at delivering, and mean it's very hard to get value for money from the aid dollar or the aid pound. So can philanthropy do better? Well, let's have a look at the context in Pakistan. The numbers aren't very good, but the most reliable estimate I can find for total giving, the total philanthropy within Pakistan, is about 1.5% of national income. So when you think about that, that doesn't seem a lot. First of all, that's double the level in Britain. So in Britain, about 0.7% of national income is giving each year. So Pakistanis are twice as generous as Brits, is the first point. Secondly, if you compare that, it's greater than the aid budget. It's also a very significant amount compared to the miserably low levels of public expenditure on basic services. So actually giving is a really, really important part of the way that Pakistan solves problems of poverty. And that's just giving within Pakistan. The second chunk is the remittances, which Mr. Gates was writing about to the G20. Last year, 2010, Pakistan received $9.4 billion in remittances, which is 5.5% of GDP. So money sent home from the diaspora is 3 times the foreign aid budget and is about the same or greater than public spending on health and education. Now, I know not all of that money is being sent home for charitable purposes. There's a really significant chunk of money there that does seem to be an enormous opportunity. So, given the resources of both giving within the country, giving coming from the diaspora, how can that really have an impact on those enormous challenges I described? Well, when I talk about philanthrocapitalism, this was something that came of my own experience working in government. How I saw that some of these new donors, like Bill Gates, like George Soros, were really applying their business their techniques of their business into their giving. They were giving in a completely different way. They weren't giving as a sense of just, here's something to alleviate a problem or as a palliative. Their real focus in the way they give is, how can I solve this problem? I'm going to mobilize and use my money to solve a problem and using all the resources available to me. So many of these philanthropists I talked to kept talking about the word leverage. They're looking for leverage from their money to try and solve problems. And that's why Bill Gates is talking now about trying to end deaths from malaria within the next 10 years, a problem that the UN has singularly failed to deliver on in the last 50 years. So there's massive ambition, and it's about saying we are going to solve problems. So I think that is the challenge I think needs to be laid down, thinking about philanthropy's contribution to Pakistan and what the diaspora can do, is how to be focused, how to be really, really ambitious about solving problems, not just putting some money to say that we care. And so Anwar asked me for some provocations on what those could be. So I've got 3 ideas for you tonight. The first one is clearly a huge chunk of the problem is government. Government is not spending enough, and government is not spending that money well enough. There's some amazing innovation going on around the world at the moment on using the new technologies of mobile phones and the internet to hold governments much more effectively to account. This is starting to work even in countries like Nigeria. So there's a lot of innovation on using those technologies to scrutinize, make public expenditure transparent. So I'd love to see some philanthropists funding tech entrepreneurs in Pakistan to come up with platforms, tools, mechanisms to scrutinize how public money is used and to really challenge government to spend its money better and really put pressure on the politicians to start meeting the needs of ordinary people. So that's the first one. The second one is, polio. Polio, I think, is a great challenge. I think it's a great challenge because it's doable. Yeah? Pakistan is one of 4 countries in the world where it's endemic. There's a global polio eradication initiative that's trying to end polio by 2013, 2014. It's currently underfunded by the official donors. Why not? Why doesn't the British Pakistani diaspora get together and say, we're going to raise £25 million, which is the same amount as the government of Pakistan has committed, and we're going to use that £25 million, and we're going to go and knock on Bill Gates' door, because he cares about polio, and we're going to ask him to match that £25 million. And then we're going to knock on the door of DFID, and we're going to say, we've got £50 million, can you match that with £50 million of our taxpayers' money, and let's eliminate polio in Pakistan within 3 years. And that would be an enormous achievement for the people of Pakistan. It would also be an enormous global good, because we need to get rid of this disease so we stop having to spend money on it. So that's one I think is doable within 3 years and can really use the leverage of getting people like Bill Gates and DFID involved. And then my third challenge is education. You can't not talk about education. So what can you do on education? Well, I think a good stretch goal is what's needed. So I think the Pakistani diaspora around the world should commit to getting 1 million kids into school. Yeah, 1 million kids by 2015. Why not? Yeah? DFID says it's going to get 4 million kids into school. We're going to get 1 million. So what we're going to do is we're going to raise a fund ourselves. We're going to get other philanthropists to match it. And then we're going to say to DFID, you match us, because we're going to spend that money better than you are. I think Citizens Foundation is putting 100,000 kids into school at the moment. 10 times seems about the right number. 1 million kids into school. This may sound crazy, but that's the point. Philanthropy can do the crazy things that governments can't. It can set these stretch goals. It can be ambitious. It can be radical. And that's what effective philanthropy really has to be if we're going to take on the enormous problems that Pakistan does face. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Amina Salahuddin, please.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I couldn't agree with you more on the last point, I have to say. Michael, I first of all would like to thank City University and the Samosa for giving us this opportunity to tell you more about the work that the Citizens Foundation does do in Pakistan. I represent the UK chapter that's based in London for the Citizens Foundation. You've heard a little bit about us in the short video, but I just want to make sure that a few points are brought home. So just to kind of reiterate what the Citizens Foundation does, we build and run schools in urban slums and rural villages of Pakistan, and we ensure that the underprivileged children of Pakistan get a high-quality education, and this is done cost-effectively. Before I tell you more about the Citizens Foundation and how we do work on the ground and here, I just want to speak very shortly on the education crisis in Pakistan and drive some numbers home as well. Just to give you a bit of a background, just why this is called an education emergency. You might have heard 25 million kids of school-going age, so you're looking at 5 to 15-year-olds are currently not in school. Makes you wonder what they're doing, running the streets. Or you can put it in another way. 1 out of 10 children globally that are out of the education system, 1 of the 10 is from Pakistan. That's a very, very high number. Female literacy in Pakistan is just 45%. That's also a very low number, so all things to be considered. Now, there are quite a few issues with education in Pakistan. One, for example, is the gap in the access to education. Currently, Pakistan has about 250,000 government schools, and to date you would need 400,000, so already you have a gap there. Now, within those 250,000 schools, about 40% of them are ghost schools, so they only exist on paper, so an even bigger gap. These are numbers that I can tell you, and these are findings by the Pakistan Education Task Force, so a government task force who's gone out there and compiled this report, a very interesting report that's available online. They themselves deem a majority of the government schools to be in unsatisfactory conditions. You're looking at lots of schools without, over 70% have no electricity, a lot of schools without toilets. That might not sound like a lot, but imagine having a kid at school, maybe 5, 6 years old, 6 hours at school, who can't go to the toilet because that would mean having to go into the fields, so you're looking at a safety issue. No boundary walls, again, a safety issue. And as mentioned, officially, about 2.6% of GDP spent on education, but again, the task force has said it's actually closer to under 1.5%. Money is an issue, obviously, but there are bigger problems with education in Pakistan, and the two biggest, I would say, is the governance, the mismanagement of the education system, and the lack of accountability in education. There's also very poor delivery with regards to the quality of education, and again, poor access to education. Education is not a very high priority item on the political agenda in Pakistan, unfortunately. Just to give you another idea of why there is a lack of accountability, any given day, 15 to 20% of government teachers do not show up for work. That means your kid might be going to school 5 days a week, and out of those 5 days, one day, there is no one at school to actually teach your child. It's also a myth that poor Pakistanis don't want to send their kids to school. They do, but there needs to be some kind of value add. The kid that's going to school will not be earning money for the family. So if it is going to be sent to school, it has to learn something, it has to be safe. Just because they're poor doesn't mean they don't want their kids to be safe in school. What really is needed is a committed leadership, a commitment to educational reform, political will to see this through, and that's difficult because education has a very long gestation period. To see what your end product is, you need to take the children through primary school and then through secondary school, and you're looking at 11 years. Who really has the time? It's a marathon, it's not a sprint. Who has the time to see those 11 years through in Pakistan? When you look at what's happened in the 60 plus years politically in Pakistan, who stuck around quite that long, and who wants to wait that long to show you that the product that has come out is a good product. Hence, kind of falls off the agenda. Now, there's a few buttons you need to push. Obviously, there's many, but there's a few very simple ones you need to push to get children into basic education. And if I may refer to the renowned thinker and economist Amartya Sen on this, there's 4 things you have to take into consideration. Schools need to be affordable, they need to be effective, they need to be safe, and they need to be easy to get to. Now, tick just those 4 boxes, and you will find that poor Pakistanis are willing to send their kids, including their daughters, to school. But you have to tick those boxes for them. I agree that education is absolutely the responsibility of the state. I actually sometimes joke about the fact that I shouldn't have the job that I have. This position shouldn't exist because it's not really my job to ensure that these children are in school. But when a system is this broken, and when a government can't cope, it is organizations, for example, like the Citizens Foundation, that needs to step in and try and fill that gap as best as they can. So what exactly is the Citizens Foundation, and what do? They were started 16 years ago by a group of friends, businessmen who used to get together, and they found themselves discussing the ills and the woes that befall Pakistan, and there are quite a few. And they just at some point realized that if they keep talking about this and don't try to find a solution, they're just as much a part of the problem. So they started looking into different things that they could help the nation with, looking into health, looking into microfinance, looking into education. And what they found was, when they delved deeper into all of these issues, that education had a positive knock-on effect on many, many other things. So for example, talking to health experts, they found that in Pakistan, 40% of health issues are actually hygiene issues. Now, if you take that, teach hygiene at school, you've knocked off 40% of the health problems. At the Citizens Foundation School, we often find, these are things we take for granted, but we have to teach our kids how to bathe, how to wash their hands, how to go to the loo properly, why they should brush their teeth and comb their hair. These are all things we need to teach them at school, but when you do, they take that home, they take that into their communities, and you knock off that 40%. Another known fact is, give a girl just 5 years of education. 5 years is what basic primary education, and she'll have 2 less kids. How's that for family planning? Health is another issue. 300,000 babies die every year in Pakistan just because their mums are illiterate. They don't know that if their kid has diarrhea, they need to give it liquids or glucose or take it to the doctor, and these 300,000 kids die. An educated mother's child is going to be a healthy child, or a healthier child at least. And then you have issues like political participation, women's awareness of the rights that they actually have, women being cheated out of property, money, land, whatever it is. If with education comes that awareness. So after going into all of this, they decided they would go into education, but it had to be done the right way. It had to be high quality education, so Citizens Foundation doesn't do poor education or poor schools for poor kids. It has to have a certain minimum quality that we provide to them. It has to be cost effective. It costs us £6 per child per month to put these kids through school, and that includes everything. That includes their textbooks, their uniforms, their teachers' salaries, their teachers' vans, conveyance, head office costs, admin costs, everything is included in those £6. It has to be a modern, relevant, secular education. And last but not least, the management has to be a professional management. It has to be transparent. That is one of the key issues in Pakistan, the trust issue. The Citizens Foundation in Pakistan is audited by KPMG. The UK chapter is a much smaller operation, but we too are externally audited every year, and these reports and financial statements are all online for anyone and everyone to access on our website and on the Citizens Foundation website. This again leads to accountability towards our donors. Now 60% of the money that we receive to support our schools comes from within Pakistan. That's a huge number. 40% comes from the diaspora. So you're looking at people like yourselves, British Asians, for example, or English trusts and foundations. That's how we raise a lot of our money here in the UK. And then you have the US chapters and the UAE chapters. So all of us together outside of Pakistan are contributing about 40%. In Pakistan, they're contributing 60% towards this. We are apolitical, we are irreligious. So in a way, I guess you could say we are run independently and free from any interference from the outside. But of course, we're always accountable to our donors. And the accountability is shown through the fact that we are transparent in the way we deal with things. Our accounts will always show you exactly where the money is being spent, what it's being spent on. And one of the main things I do want to point out is one of our main goals is to get more girls into school. As I said, female literacy is very low in Pakistan. And again, it also varies according to regions. I mean, when I say 45%, if you go into inner Balochistan, it's probably something like 2%. So, we just need to keep that in mind. TCF is present all across Pakistan in all 4 provinces of the country, in about 83 cities and towns. And we charge a means-tested fees for these kids to come to school. Now that can be as low as 10 rupees for a child, which is maybe £6 or £7 a month. The reason we do this is illiterate parents often don't have the confidence to question. But once you're paying something, now they don't know their kids are being subsidized, they think the education is costing them 10 rupees and that's it. That gives them the confidence to come up to a principal or a teacher and question them why their kid isn't doing well. That's the reason why we charge them this mean-tested fees. I mean, about 86% of the money that we need to run the Citizens Foundation comes from people like yourselves. But that little bit needs to come from them so they feel ownership for their children's education. In these 16 years, what the Citizens Foundation has achieved is 730 school units across Pakistan. You're looking at primaries and secondaries. So once these primary kids had gone through, they had to go somewhere. So we started building secondaries, and that's what we are focusing on right now as well, getting kids into secondary. After that, we try to get them either into vocational training, or if they want to go on to tertiary education, that's what we aim for. A child that can't afford to go to school can't afford to go to college, so we make sure if they get admission into a college, we have partnerships across Pakistan, and we get them a full scholarship so that they can go to school, can go on to college, can go on to university. Our schools are purpose-built. They have their own labs. They have science labs, PC labs, art rooms, libraries, anything that you would want in a school, in a good school. They have an all-female faculty. which again gets more girls into school for us. Parents want a safe environment at school. They trust female teachers more. It costs us a little bit more to have an all-female faculty, but what that does is, one, it gets more girls into schools, but it also allows employment for a lot of women. Speaking to a lot of them when I was there in May, they said, our families know what a good environment we have at the Citizens Foundation, and they allow us to go out to these far-flung places in these rural villages and actually work. If it wasn't for the Citizens Foundation, we probably wouldn't be working right now. So it's kind of two-pronged in that way. And our kids do really well. 98% of them pass board exams. Now, these aren't exams we make up. These are state exams, and 98% of them are passing them. And they do so with very, very good grades. 84% do that with an A+, an A or a B grade, which is an excellent result for anyone, but especially these children who have no support at home from their parents who are illiterate. We also have our own in-house teacher training, and we focus on female adult literacy, so mothers, even grandmothers, or older siblings who never had the chance to go to school get that opportunity through the female adult literacy programs. The Citizens Foundation is also one of the highest ranked NGOs in Pakistan by the Pakistan Center of Philanthropy. And just recently we announced our membership with the Clinton Global Initiative, which we hope will open up a lot of other avenues for us. I just want to pick on one point because I know Anwar is going to be talking about the DFID, 650 million, how that might be dispersed, etc. I have some issues as well, just like Mike was mentioning, about effectiveness, where this money is going, who they're partnering with, how they are going to be measuring the outcomes, etc. But I do want to mention one point that I think is quite important and that we get asked a lot, which is why we aren't currently working with the government. Now, as I said, the lack of accountability for government school teachers is a massive problem. We're known for being cost effective and having a high quality education. Currently, the way things are set up in Pakistan, if you're a government teacher, you're a teacher for life. You can't ever be fired. You might not show up to work and you might collect your paycheck, but you can still never be fired. That's a huge issue for us. So once that's kind of been sorted, and that will probably take quite a while, we feel that we would be compromising on our education, on our educational quality, and that is something that we just cannot do, because that's what we're known for, that's what our reputation is built on. That's why we're credible to people inside of Pakistan and outside of Pakistan. But what I would suggest is we're always open to dialogue with the government on this, but also with regards to DFID, I will just say one thing. If they do consider opening up the pool for the 650 million, to make sure it is used in the most effective way, this is a lot of taxpayer money we're looking at, to make sure it's used effectively and efficiently, we as the Citizens Foundation would suggest that a slice of the pie be taken, this money be given to credible NGOs such as the Citizens Foundation and others. They get a slice of the pie, they get certain schools that they need to bring up to, say, the Citizens Foundation's quality of education, but then the hiring and firing powers, that's the key. You need to give the NGOs that as well. And once you have that, bring someone in 3 years later, 4 years later, whatever is appropriate, for a third-party assessment. And then if you find that these NGOs aren't delivering on what they promised they would, then you can fire them. But looking at the current government track record and looking at, say, the Citizens Foundation's track record, I'm pretty confident that, they would deliver and do a much better job of it. So I think that would be a much better use of taxpayers' money. And just one last thing before I end, I just want to encourage anyone who goes to Pakistan or might be going to Pakistan, we really encourage people to go and see the schools for themselves, because I could just go on and tell you loads of other things, and I'm happy to talk offline with any of you who wants to come up to me, but if you are going, do get in touch with me. Seeing really is believing. We would love for you to go and see one of our schools, and because we're all across Pakistan, I promise you, wherever you are, there is going to be a school close to you that we can go and show you. Thank you very much.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, thank you to Samosa for the opportunity here tonight for us to be able to share some of the work that Islamic Relief does in Pakistan. Islamic Relief is a British NGO, an NGO that was set up in 1984, almost 27 years ago now. It's a member of the DEC, a coalition of the leading aid agencies in the UK who are committed to humanitarian principles of neutrality and impartiality. In terms of Islamic Relief, I mean, it's an organization that's grown in the last 27 years, an organization that is now considered as one of the top 5 mainstream charities in the UK. It delivers over £200 million worth of development projects across the world. There's 100 branches across the globe with offices in 40 countries. And in that £200 million that the organization delivers across the globe, the work involves a combination of humanitarian aid, long-term development, and advocacy on behalf of beneficiaries across the globe. The organization is an organization that could be explained or termed as a people-to-people organization, which primary source of funding comes from the general public. And on that point, 60% of IRUK's contribution towards Islamic Relief Worldwide family comes from the Pakistani community. So it's quite fitting for us to have this discussion on how Islamic Relief and what Islamic Relief does in Pakistan. And in this presentation, what I'll try to bring to your attention is how and what we've done in Pakistan in the aftermath of the floods in 2010. Islamic Relief has a history and a long-term presence in Pakistan for 20 years, working across Pakistan in the areas that we work in, from education, child welfare, emergency response, water and sanitation, and other areas where there is an acute need for intervention. But in terms of the flood and the aftermath of the floods in 2010, the approach that the organization took is one of an integrated approach, so whereby you have different organizations concentrating on different aspects of a delivery or intervention. The organization Islamic Relief decided to take more of an integrated approach, because one of the assertions was that what good is a house to an individual without training or without a microcredit loan which they could use to rebuild their income and their families and their communities and kickstart that development phase within their communities. So that integrated approach meant that wherever we identified the need, and through the cluster system that the UN uses, which it gave Islamic Relief the lead in terms of shelter, to basically ensure that wherever that area was, where a house was built, there was an adequate drainage facility there was an adequate water and sanitation facilities, there were supplies there for education and health, and there was an income generation aspect to the whole intervention, whether that be through a microcredit loan, which is Sharia compliant, or whether it be through a training program to give people that opportunity and that skill that they can use to rebuild their lives. And the approach of the organization has always been and will always be an approach which instills or reinstills dignity into people's life and empowers communities and individuals, so that they are not just receiving handouts, but it's rather a help up. And that's the approach that is used. And that's where the funds that are raised through diaspora communities and through institutions and through philanthropists, that's where that funds are used. And in terms of that project and how that project is implemented, that is also of interest, I believe, to you guys here, because what we could easily do is basically pick an area with the expertise that we have, with the design that we have achieved and we've corrected, with the involvement of the communities, because that is an actual and a very important aspect of involving communities, because it's very easy for an international NGO to go to an area and say, right, this is the answers, this is how it's going to be done, you're going to listen to us and we're going to do this for you. Rather, the approach is, let's do this together. You have an issue here, you have a situation here, we are Islamic Relief, we're here to support you, we have the backing of the people, of the communities, wherever they may be from, and we want to help you. And that involvement is absolutely crucial and centric to Islamic Relief's work, because it empowers people, it gives people a sense of ownership, and through that, the villages that and that you saw on that video has been possible, because it's not just about hiring labor and making sure that these buildings or these houses are built or rebuilt. Rather, it's about getting people trained in the local community by these skilled labor, and then leaving this community with supervision to be able to rebuild their own houses, and through that be involved in a cash for work program, which will also give them an income, and then that could then help them restart their lives and set up their families again. So, with my own experience and having been to Pakistan just a couple of months ago, what you saw is that those areas where we intervened, and those areas where people were involved in the rebuilding of their communities, in the rebuilding of their immediate areas, those people are now able to extend that house. So where we were only able to fund or facilitate a certain area of rebuilding, they've now attached other areas, and that's been possible through that intervention of the locals, and through that provision of the Cash for Work project. And if we look at this whole cost-effective measure that we believe in, and if we look how this simple cost-effective measure of hiring skilled labor or professionals as opposed to giving opportunity to locals, you'll see the saving that's being made, and then you'll see the reinvestment into people's lives, and then you'll see how that empowering communities and that help up project or helping hand ethos comes into place. And if we look at the other areas of the whole approach to the work that Islamic Relief has been engaging in, and if you look at the advocacy area that the organization has been involved in terms of publishing a report, which publishes the findings from our experience and research, and which has been presented to both the British government and to the Pakistani government with recommendations for the future as to how to handle things and where things went wrong, and how as an aid agency where we saw the gaps and what we feel that the gaps were, and how we think that we can as a collective make sure that these gaps don't happen in the future. And then if you look at and if you address the issue of suitcase charities, as it were, because in no way do we belittle the efforts of individuals, but there is a stark contrast between the effectiveness, as Michael alluded to before, because effectiveness is the key to aid work. Because there is, in my visits to Pakistan, I've seen mountains of clothes just littering the streets, and that's not effective aid, that's a waste, because that effort and that money that has been used to send that clothes over there could have been better used. That initiative and that energy that was used to accumulate that clothes could have been better used. So instead of individuals without the connections going out to areas where there's been a need for intervention, and going out there, whether it be with clothes or with other things, and not having the access or not having the knowledge or not having the resources to be able to reach out to proper recipients or beneficiaries, that's a problem. It's also a problem for an individual or an organization to go out there with just funds and distribute that, because that causes an inequality within society. And where we've seen that as an aid agency, where we are working in rebuilding communities, where we're working with this integrated projects, where somebody's gone out there with a suitcase full of money or whatever it may have been and distributed money without making sure that each individual received an equal share, you have an inequality, you have a mini civil war on your hands. On the other hand, where these people are given these funds, and they don't have that that motivation to go out and come out and rebuild their community. So that's the problem. But the way that initiative, that energy, that goodwill can be challenged through established means and established ways, such as established charities like Islamic Relief and the other charities that are being represented here. That is a reliable avenue. That is an accountable avenue. That is a transparent avenue for us to be able to see our donations, our hard-earned money being used to revitalize and change lives. And then, further going into that, and where philanthropy or philanthropists our workings. For example, we can use the example of James Khan, and we all saw the documentation around his visit in the aftermath of the floods in 2010, and how he went out with some funds, and how he tried to intervene, and how he tried to meet some of the needs of the people. Then what he found there, he hit a brick wall, and that brick wall was that access. Access is the crucial element here. And then he came to Islamic Relief and he said, look guys, I've tried to do this, but I can't take it any further. I need your help. And we happily facilitated that. And since then, we've now worked with him, and we've built 3 or 4 integrated villages with him through the James Khan Foundation. So our message to philanthropists and individuals and organizations who have been blessed with the opportunity to be able to help people in a big way, whether is to, whether if they want to set up a foundation in their names, then that's fine. We don't have any objections or any problems with people setting up foundations, but do it through a reliable source. Do it through a source that you can hold accountable. Do it through a source that is transparent. And that's the same for an individual or an organization, because we all want to see the benefits of our aid. And to finish, I just would like to point out to you that, since the disaster, obviously we're carrying on with our work, and we're in the other areas as well as in the rebuilding phase of the areas affected by the floods. But one thing that we've been strongly working on is advocacy, and in making sure that disaster preparedness, disaster risk reduction is on the agenda of the government. And I'd like to read out to you a quote from General Nadeem Ahmed, former chairman of Pakistan's National Disaster Management Agency, where he says, "We are spending 3 billion in relief and recovery, and we've suffered over 10 billion in terms of losses, without even including the trauma that people went through. Had we spent only 40 million in making sure our flood protection structures are maintained, these losses would have been reduced to 1/10. We would have been able to save a lot of lives, properties, and the trauma the affected population went through." So if we look at, and if we move towards risk reduction, if we look at prevention measures before a flood hits, before these casualties arrive, before this money is wasted, then we can see how that money can then be reinvested, perhaps in education, because that is a crying shame to realize the kind of situation the children are in Pakistan. So, that's some food for thought, and we'd hope that you will join us in this advocacy in making sure that this risk reduction is on the top of the agenda, and it's something that is achieved and something that people take, and the governments take seriously, and that they implement, so that if this disaster is repeated, instead of a loss of 10 billion, perhaps there will be a loss of 1 billion with a spending of something as little as 40 million. So that's something for us to think about. Thank you very much once again. If you want to know any more about Islamic Relief, please come and talk to myself or my colleague here, Martin. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Razul. Asif Ranguwala, please.
Okay. Thank you, Samosa. Thank you, City University, for putting this together. I'm going to keep it short and sweet. I'm sure there's lots of questions out there. Being an entrepreneur, I believe in a glass half full than a glass half empty. So I'm listening to a lot of empty stuff here. And I think a lot of it is fact, but we need to move forward. We need to go on, okay? And that's where something that was created about 2 years ago or about a year and a half ago, called the British Pakistan Foundation, came into being. What we see is that there's Pakistan and its issues, okay, and you're not going to solve it overnight. It's like a big ship, and you're trying to turn it in the middle of the ocean. You cannot turn it. It's going to take a while to swing around, okay? So we need to want to attack the sources of the problems, and I think Michael raised it in his discussion, and both these people here, the TCF and Islamic Relief, have raised it, is that, how do you solve the problem? And one of the big problems is the aid coming from foreign countries, okay? It is not being directed correctly because these are political grants rather than social grants. And one of the jobs and one of the roles of the BPF is to bring this to light to the UK government, specifically in this case, and we've examined it. So the BPF was formed from a vision in the US called the APF, which is the American Pakistan Foundation, which is very similar to the American Indian Foundation, okay? This is all about expats or Pakistanis who have become local diaspora outside of Pakistan, helping their country. Why? Because a lot of the funds that are collected during disaster, and as you can see, we've got a home remittance of $9.6 billion a year. Well, a lot of it is collected during times of stress and problems, but it never seems to get directed in the right way. Or if it does, what happens is nobody's doing it wrong, but a lot of the times, you're missing the wood from the trees, okay? And this is where we feel that BPF, which is a public body, it's not somebody's pocket edition, so people will keep coming in and moving out, has got two objectives. One is to try to play a middle role between local diaspora represented by NGOs like Islamic Republic and others, Islamic Relief, not Islamic Republic, and it's becoming a republic. No, and other NGOs, and trying to coordinate their efforts. Alongside with that, trying to get the UK government. Now, the only way you can convince the UK government to really listen to people like BPF is giving a say to the local diaspora. Why? Because you've got 1.2 million Pakistanis or British Pakistanis who live here or who have been born here, most of them, who have never really harnessed their vote. So if you really look at it, and if you have a 65% population going to vote, out of which 1.2 million votes are there, well, then you're talking about 3-4% of the vote, then you have some power. Until you don't do that, you're not going to get it. However, that's a separate topic. Right now, the BPF is engaged in creating a platform to act as a go-between between Pakistani NGOs, local diaspora, and the UK government. And we are not an aid collecting agency. We're more of a coordinating and an umbrella agency which would like to actually support the activities of other organizations, whether they be the UK government or the Pakistan government or local and Pakistani NGOs. That's what our role is. We hope that over the next 1 or 2 years we will be able to get Pakistanis or second and third generation Pakistanis living in the UK, not only to help us but also to create the basis of a platform where where they have a say, where there is an organization which actually then can influence the likes of DFID and other government agencies who are funding Pakistan. Thank you very much.
Hugh Mclean, please.
Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you, everyone else in the panel, for, I think, doing all the hard work, giving us all the facts. So I'm not going to throw any more at you. But I think I'll make a few remarks that hopefully will lead into the discussion. I'm sure that people are very keen to come in. Can philanthropy aid development in Pakistan? Yes or no? I think the answer has to be yes and no. I think we've heard a lot about the yes tonight. Quite honestly, I've been to Pakistan several times a year for the last 6 years or so, probably. And it's the most amazing country because I find that whenever I have an idea about something that should be attempted, I find somebody's doing it. They're actually doing it better than I thought. They've got a better idea about it. They're doing it with a lot more energy and a lot more passion. And so there's tremendous resolve to get things done. The Citizens Foundation, I've been to several of the schools. I think it's genuinely one of the best NGOs internationally anywhere that I've ever seen in terms of the quality of the work, the commitment of the people that they're doing. The Islamic Relief, but in addition to that, the response of ordinary Pakistanis to the disasters, to the earthquake, to the floods, was completely overwhelming. People just got in their cars, went out to those areas, started schools, did things, an enormously generous and wonderful response. So I see, it's one of these countries that somehow, from my point of view, brings out the best and the worst of humanity, and in quite a very powerful and very compelling way. So I think it's clear that there's a lot of good things that are happening, but there is something seriously wrong here that we need to deal with. Why is the government only giving 2.6% to education and 2.6% to health? And actually, it's a bit worse than that. It probably isn't. It's probably a little bit less than that. And I'll tell you something else about the 2.6% or the 2.2 or the 1.8, which is more likely that actually gets out, is quite a lot of it is returned to the government because the absorption capacity isn't actually there. So there's something very, very odd and very broken about this system. The other thing that I can tell you about teachers, yes, they're not teaching, but there's a lot of absenteeism in the schools, but teachers have an enormous amount of other tasks other than their education to contend with. They are civil servants, they have election duty, they have all sorts of stamp duties, they are pulled out of the classroom every 5 minutes to do things and to take on other responsibilities. And also, a lot of them that are women teachers have ongoing responsibilities to their families that somehow don't sort of disappear while they have full-time jobs. Teachers that I've spoken to before said, well, why actually don't you come to school when, this is part of your job? I said, well, who's going to cook the food and look after the family? I had to do this and I had to do that. And so the pressure on them doesn't necessarily let up. So there really are, I think, some quite fundamental issues that need to be looked at that make all of this aid absolutely necessary. And unless we deal with those fundamental issues, this aid is going to continue to be necessary for forever and a day. So I think those are the kinds of questions that need to be thought about and spoken about. So that's the no part. But I have, I think, 3 suggestions that I think that are important, that I found important in our work, in our engagement with Pakistan. And they're general, in fact, for some countries, but I think they're particularly sharp for Pakistan. I think, firstly, international donors need to listen more. It's a platitude, I know, but actually they really do need to listen more. There's been a lot of research on Pakistan by international donors. In fact, it's a very well-researched country from a policy point of view. A huge amount of money has been spent on doing research, and generally the policy position papers are very well put together and very well thought through. The difficulty, of course, is in the implementation. And the problem with that kind of consultation about what should happen is that it's usually done at the level of the elites in society, elites in government, and even the elites in the NGOs sectors. And one of the difficulties, I think, with Pakistan is it's very, very difficult to get beyond the vested interests of those elites, whether they are feudal elites that dominate the government, whether they are military elites that dominate just about everything in society, or whether they are very well-intended middle-class NGO elites that have had entrenched positions in NGOs for many, many years. It's very, very difficult to get beyond those interest groups. And I think it's a crucial thing for donors to invest the time and to build the relationships that will get beyond those, that sort of tray of delicious kind of goodies that you're always offered in terms of, the NGOs and the things that you can fund and the people that you can engage with. It's always so tremendously exciting. That can keep you very, very busy just dealing with all of those bright things. But it's what's not on that tray that's offered you as a donor that is really important. It will take time to develop those relationships and to get beyond that. So I think what really is needed, in fact, for international donors is to get beyond the obvious, the things that are done usually, and to actually get down to real work at district level. Find people that haven't really been spoken to before. If you speak to teachers in the country, in a way, even teachers' unions, even though political difficulties with teachers' unions, they'll say, we've never spoken to a donor before, ever. Never met them. So people will come in and do education reform and have been dealing with education reform in the country for 2-3 decades, but never actually take the people who have to deliver education every day seriously. That's ridiculous. But there's too much of that, and it goes on and on and on and on. It's perpetuated completely by all of these people who have got used to doing things in the same way. So those, for me, I think, are the two first things that we need to deal with. Get beyond the beyond the elites that you normally have to deal with. Donors need to do their homework, think beyond the obvious bits of research that they've got as well. And I think the last thing for me that's completely crucial is that we need to get beyond project orientation. Donors always want to see something for their money. That's why they'll be funding textbooks rather than things that are harder to see. But there has to be a longer-term commitment and a systemic engagement, looking at the smaller processes where ordinary people, ordinary communities get involved in these processes in a more fundamental way and start developing the confidence and the ability to take on government at a local level, to challenge them, to challenge national government, and to challenge donors and the priority spendings that they have. So I think there needs to be a few big shifts in the way we do business in Pakistan in terms of the kinds of relationships that are built and the priorities that we set ourselves. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move to audience Q&As very shortly. I just want to ask some very brief questions of the panel before we do that. And I'm going to start with Michael. Michael, I've been on the receiving end of quite a few abusive texts and Twitters and emails today about why are we talking about aid, and aid always leads to dependency culture and certain vested interests. And I just wonder if you could address the issue of how aid can be used for development and can be done so in a transparent manner.
Well, I've been tweeting, so I'm glad to say there's no more abuses coming for you. So that's a good news. Two things. I think sometimes we can get in this thing about saying it's got to be about long-term sustainable development or nothing. And I think we have to recognise that there are two things. One is aid, which may be meeting immediate needs, and then there's another one which is long-term development investment. And I think both are legitimate, and neither should ignore the other. So it's definitely right that some interventions do not build long-term sustainable development, but maybe actually by meeting immediate needs, saving lives, still be worthwhile. And getting that balance right, and rather than saying it's got to be one or the other, is absolutely crucial. And I think the other one with the dependency is, I think a problem that donors, especially official donors, have is how to spend the money. It's very easy to make gestures and commitments saying we're going to spend hundreds of millions of pounds in a country like Pakistan, but spending it is much harder, and there are no prizes for saying we don't know how to spend it. And that's the danger, that you end up with this sort of disbursement mentality where you're pumping the money out without asking whether it's doing much good. And I think, I didn't know about the work of the British Pakistan Foundation tonight. I think to build a bridge, to be a challenge, to push towards effectiveness, and say it's not about how much money you're committing, it's how much impact you're having, I think is a really, really powerful force.
Thank you. Amina, a large part of the British Pakistani community is outside of London, Manchester, Leeds, Birmingham, Sheffield. And, do you acknowledge that in your work and your fundraising?
That's actually a market that we would love to kind of tap into. We have tried to look into that. Obviously, there is a massive diaspora out there, and they're very, very important to us. We are very London-centric still, and I would say that kind of leads, and that kind of comes out of the fact that we are still quite a small operation in the UK, so resources are quite a big issue for us. We'd love to be up there. We have been to different big cities where we know there's a huge Pakistani British community, but unfortunately without the resources, and I'm talking manpower, we currently we've gone from 2 people to 2.5. That's a very small team. We'd love to be able to be there, but for that you have to have constant follow-ups, and we recognize that. I do think, though, that with regards to communication, now that we have gone up by half a person, I do sincerely hope that we can start looking into that again, and we do have a few supporters. We have a few very, very committed supporters in Bradford and Newcastle, and we know that we just need to kind of harness those kinds of people, get them more involved, but that takes time, that takes money, and hopefully they will be the vehicle for us further up north. But it's very, very hard to do so if you don't have an office and you don't have a select person up there.
Razul, just regarding Islamic relief and I mean, you're probably the closest person to this. One of the things I often think is that the amount of work that's done in mosques, the people's own personal giving, the obligation for zakat that Muslims follow, doesn't get publicised outside of the Muslim community. Is that something that Islamic Relief are trying to do more of?
I think that's a very good and very important point there. And I think we've always tried to publicize the fact that, especially during Ramadan and, in the year of the floods, Islamic Relief raised £12 million in a month. And that's in Ramadan. And if you take into consideration how much money that it actually is, within a month we raised over £8 million for Pakistan alone. And that shows the goodwill of the Muslim community. But it has to be also said that it's not just the Muslim community responding to this disaster. And even with Islamic Relief, we have non-Muslim donors. And then if you look at the DEC and the funds that it raises. So I think that there's that context of Islamic duties and obligations, but at the same time I think there's this generic British goodwill towards the less fortunate, and this belief that we have instilled within us that there is a duty and an obligation as a human being towards those that are suffering in another country, wherever that may be, and we must respond to that. That's why I think you see the major charities and the DEC members responding in the size and the manner that they do, because they are given that mandate through the fundraising efforts and through the contribution and the generous contribution of the British public and the Muslim, the Hindu, the Sikh, and all the other religious communities.
Okay, thank you. Asif, can I ask you, we've got the British Pakistani Foundation and the American Pakistani Foundation. Do you think there's a difference between the two diasporas in the way they work, their aims, the nature of the communities?
I think there is a fundamental difference because, a lot of the Pakistanis that move to the U.S. Become U.S. citizens, and they are really, really far away. And I think the ethnicity issue sort of goes out because the U.S. is a melting pot, and you become American, okay? But you have your roots and you want to help, and that's what the Americans are good at. In the case of the UK, we are very different because we have got our own communities which have developed here. So if you go to Bradford and if you go to Birmingham and if you go further up north, you have seriously, small little Pakistani communities where things haven't really changed. So I think there is a difference between the two diasporas. Okay, the objectives are very much the same, that we want to help, but I think that British Pakistanis seem to retain their Pakistani ethnicity a lot longer, for whatever that reason is. I don't know.
Okay. Hugh, you've worked in a lot of developing nations. You've spent a lot of time in Pakistan, and you're South African born as well, I believe. So I'm just interested in your take on, is there a specific problem with Pakistan in terms of whether it's leadership, whether it's lack of meritocracy, whether it's education? What is the one thing, if I was to put you in charge, what's the one thing you would say needs to change?
I'm glad you saved the easy question for me.
Yeah.
Good heavens. I think the strange thing about countries, as different as they all are, that in the end, at some level, things are very much the same. People are people wherever you go. They're very, very different historical contexts, and these always have a huge effect. But I think beyond that, things actually are quite simple in the end. For me, it's down to, if you have to look at a population, do you have a buy-in and a real engagement, an empowering engagement by all Pakistanis, particularly poorer Pakistanis? That's the thing that really makes the difference in any country. One of the things about Pakistan, as with a lot of other developing countries, is that elite group is actually so small, so that the power they have in society is so significant, quite overwhelming. And you also have this tradition of political parties being inherited, in families that you get in certain countries. I think that has a huge effect on democracy transformation and the ability for democracy to really begin to make a difference on people's lives in a country. I sometimes think that very little can be done unless there's change that comes from below, and we've seen huge movements in the Middle East and elsewhere. And I think at some point that day will come for Pakistan. And quite honestly, I wonder whether much can be done until there is a significant movement for change from below. And I think only at that point will the elites at the top take notice and do something different.
I've heard a lot from the panel about the incompetence and corruption of the Pakistan government. Now, Winston Churchill said that a people always gets the government that they deserve. So what does it say about the Pakistani people that when they have free elections, they vote for these corrupt incompetents?
Okay, let's take the question from the back as well, please.
My name is Emma Shoemaker, and I've been living and working in Pakistan since 2004. I've got two very brief questions. One is, Mike, to pick up your point about the role of supporting tech entrepreneurs. I mean, Pakistan has perhaps, apart from India, one of the most vibrant tech sectors in the region, and I'm wondering what role philanthropy could play in supporting them to make changes in Pakistan. And the second question, I've just come from an event where Maliha Lodi was speaking, and she made the point that the public sector's expenditure is about $4 billion a year. Aid from the US is about 1.5. What role for aid and for philanthropists, which is inevitably going to be smaller than aid, in leveraging change within the public sector to make that wastage far less?
Okay, and the young man there, please.
Is it on?
It's okay, we can hear you.
Hello. My name's Kashif. I'm a medical student at King's. I think the gentleman over there has just asked my question, but I'd like to build on that by asking whether IMF loans and foreign aid have a synergistic effect to your philanthropic efforts, or rather the opposite, thereby necessitating your work.
Okay. Who wants to go on that from the panel first? Any takers?
I'll tackle the first question. I don't think Churchill was right, particularly in relation to Pakistan. I don't think it's as simple as that. I think, if you have a healthy democracy and everybody votes, perhaps talking Italy, maybe, perhaps they deserve Berlusconi. But when you have entrenched inequalities over a long, long period with the depth of poverty that you have in Pakistan, I don't think that's anything you could even suggest for Pakistan, actually. I mean, I think the problems are far beyond a simple prescription. Okay.
Do the tech. On the tech and philanthropy, I think the principles should be fund plenty of organisations, because I think competition is great. Yeah. Be prepared to fund some risky organisations, maybe some startups, not just established organisations, getting a bit beyond the usual suspects, as he was talking about. And thirdly, maybe this doesn't have to be grant making and philanthropy. Maybe this could be business, maybe investing in tech businesses. And I think one of the most interesting organisations I know is this group called Omidyar Network, founded by Pierre Omidyar, the guy who created eBay. And they both give grants, they make investments. So they're doing amazing work all around the world on accountability and transparency. And what they say is they use the right instruments to do the job. So actually, if you can create a for-profit social enterprise that is doing work on government transparency and accountability, then actually it's much more sustainable than a grant-dependent charity. So I think being really imaginative and creative. And can I just say, Omidyar Network does have a commitment to work in Pakistan. So I think a partner may be for the British Pakistani Foundation.
Razul, do you want to come in?
I just wanted to perhaps add a different view, or perhaps add to Hugh's point about the people deserving the government that they get in aid. I think from experience and having travelled quite extensively for the charity work, and having spoken to some people whilst in Pakistan and even in Bangladesh, and you could say that the problems may be similar in both the countries. I think what you, and again, alluding to what Hugh said, when you speak to the individuals, you get a sense that because of the situation that they're in and the mere desperation that they faced with, that they have no other option but to choose the alternative, whatever that they may be. So that's why I think you also tend to have a constant revolving chair in these countries, because people tend to believe that, if this is as bad as it gets with this particular party, let me try this. And again, when the elections come back next year, well, they're saying this, let me try this. And I think that's the problem that these people face. And I don't think it's just a perception that people are, in particular with these countries, that they deserve the government that they get.
I mean, just on the democracy point, it's worth remembering that this will be the first government in Pakistan elected that hands power to another elected government. So Pakistan's never actually managed democracy into double digits. So, good democracies often come from bad democracies. The chap right at the back, and the chap in the blue shirt, and the lady there with her hand raised. Blue shirt and then the lady there. Okay. Who's going to go first? The chap in the back can go first.
Hi, yeah. I'm from Birmingham, and in Birmingham we have a school, it's Small Eid School. It's 95% Pakistani kids, and it's got the worst education rate in the whole of Birmingham City Council. So if you guys are training yourself as British Pakistanis, I think charity begins at home. Let's see what we could do for education with our British Pakistani kids in Britain before Pakistan. Because I don't think anyone's doing anything here. I just think this is just about $650 million of aid, and you want to benefit the taxpayer here by performing the duties which the government of Pakistan cannot perform by offering education. Is that what you're saying? Correct? But why don't you do the taxpayer another favor by reducing the aid which is going to go to Pakistan, by telling the Foreign Office that all the Pakistani politicians who have corrupted the aid in the past have all apartments here on Park Lane. Half of London is filled with their money, and these guys have paid a penny of tax in Pakistan. You don't want to go into their corruption and anything. 1 minute, Anwar, 1 minute, this is important. These guys have paid £1 million of apartments in England with my money, with the taxpayers' money. Now, instead of offering that money to Pakistan in aid and everybody fighting over the 650 million, I could spend it better, why don't you tell the Foreign Office to put a confiscation order on these apartments, on these buildings, and then let them guys pay the tax in Pakistan for these apartments, and you will see, you will reduce the foreign aid for Pakistan from Britain to 50%, which you will do a double favor for the taxpayer of England and the Foreign Office.
I will take... I'll take your answer directly to that in a minute, sir. Two other questions. It's Simon, I think, had a hand up, and then there's a chap there with a mic. If we take Simon first, then we'll come to Nafis.
Thanks. I'm a journalist from the UK, working in Pakistan for the last 4 years. At the moment, obviously, in the build-up to the election, there's been lots of rallies, and the increasingly popular PTI, which is Imran Khan's political party, is promoting the abolishment or non-acceptance of American aid, primarily, or any aid. One of his platforms is to say that Pakistan can and will stop accepting foreign aid. I wanted to know, as philanthropists, entrepreneurs, and aid workers yourselves, how you receive that. Do you believe it's possible? Does Pakistan even have the capacity to go on without that aid? And is it in a position not to accept that aid? And if that does happen, what position does that put you in? How do you feel about that?
Okay. Nafis. Yeah, go for it. Okay. Do you want to take the Alan Sugar question first, or shall I take Birmingham first?
I think in order of importance, let's take Birmingham first.
Thank you. Okay. My friend, look, this is something I think about a lot. I've been involved in work supporting NGOs and aid and welfare in Pakistan for the last 2 years, and that's a very serious issue. I'm going to point you to two things. Anatole Lieven, in his book, Pakistan, a Hard Country, actually said something quite strange about the corruption in Pakistan, that because of the nature of Baradri and committee, the corruption whilst there are many, many corrupt politicians that are doing many, many bad things, the corruption within it has this really weird form of Keynesianism, where to be a corrupt person, you've got to put 1,000 people on your payroll. So it's a kind of, I'm not justifying it, it's very real, and it's something Pakistan has to overcome. But one of the things that made me set the Samosa up is we've really got to try, my friend, to go beyond this idea that everything in Pakistan's corrupt and everything's bad, because it's not. And if we can do work to support the Citizens Foundation and the ED Foundation and the work that's done around zakat in mosques and make awareness of what Open Society are doing and Citizens Foundation are doing, then we should. And finally, I think, as you know, I'm a British Pakistani. I've spent maybe a year of my life in Pakistan, but I think I'm serving Britain's interests by trying to work to stabilise and help development in Pakistan. So I don't for 1 minute duck some of the awful things that are happening in Pakistan, but I think talking about it, raising awareness about it and challenging it is really important. And Simon, on your point about Imran Khan, it was really interesting because he seemed to then clarify that he was talking very specifically to American aid. And of course, there's all sorts of issues there, not least what American foreign policy is in the region. But did kind of separate DFID and what DFID was doing. I'll be corrected if I was wrong, and I'm not involved in the minutiae of DFID's delivery, but I think there is more transparency in what's happening around DFID and the schools programme, though it's early doors and it's yet to prove its effectiveness. Does anyone else on the panel want to come in on these issues?
Yeah, I want to just say something to the gentleman up there that, you know, if you start looking at those kind of issues that individuals have with avoiding taxes and all of that, I think that's very individual. There are a lot of other people. Well, no, I just wanted to say, look, if you want to solve the problem at home, then you've got to start it at home. As you say, charity begins at home. And my first statement about the BPF was one of the things we're looking at is that I'm an expat Pakistani. I'm not, but my kids, they're British Pakistanis. They're all born here. They've been raised here. They went to school here. They went to college here. So, you know, these guys, you need to take a look at what you are doing in this country because you're British for whatever it is. And you need to fix the problem. So I think the problem needs to be solved here, whether you're sending 650 million pounds home, or whether you're spending 400 or 4 billion, or whether you're giving them nothing. So I think, you know, the problem starts at home. We need to fix it here. This is not the people's problem from back home. What they do for tax, I mean, you know, you got guys going from here to Barbados and living there, and they're just as bad as we are. So I just wanted to make that clarification, okay?
Michael, do you want to come in?
The development economist Paul Collier has a great story about Vietnam in the 1980s, which basically got aid from the World Bank vetoed because of America's political position. And actually what happened was Vietnam got on rather well with its business. They had to do the reforms they really wanted to do, the reforms that really mattered. It earned Vietnam credibility in the global capital markets because they were doing it because they wanted to do it, not for a bribe. So, you know, maybe it's not such a crazy idea. It's something we should bear in mind. I think to care about poverty doesn't mean you have to be the cheerleader always of more aid spending. I think what philanthropy can do is set up a challenge. I'm very pleased about the numbers that Amina gave me. So it's £6 per child per month. So with economies of scale, call that £50 a year to get a child into school. So £50 million a year to put 1 million kids in school. Citizens Foundation then could be a bit of competition for DFID and say, you're going for 4 million for £650 million. We're going to do 1 million for £50 million.
Thank you.
There we go.
Hugh.
Competition.
Yeah, I think just a comment about the worst school in Bradford. Birmingham.
Yeah.
There's probably one in Bradford too, actually. I mean, I think we've seen all over Europe that there's an increasing segregation at school level. With schools that are performing worse tend to be filled with migrant or minority communities of some sort. So I think that's a problem that you need to look at societies in Western Europe, and they go beyond, I think, the particular issues that face any of those minority communities. I think they are bigger and they're linked to the education systems in these countries.
Okay. Just very quickly, Emery's the point you made about new technologies and also Pakistan's demographic dividend. You know, 160 million, 60% are under 19. So the two are linked. That's Pakistan's salvation. That's how you get democracy and accountability and people being able to own the country and the nation.
My question may be slightly controversial here, but we do agree on the fact that development has a very widespread meaning other than education and the flood problems that have been going on. Literacy rate in Pakistan, 35-37%. And that definition is where those people can either write their name, do their signature, and read the newspaper. That's where the literacy definition ends. Yeah? You said good democracy often comes from a bad one as a succession. I'd like to reiterate on my point. Liaquat Ali Khan, being the first prime minister, was succeeded by Khwaja Nazimuddin, who was not, even after the assassination, 5 years in the office. So, that's just a little correction there. My point is this. During Ayub Khan's during Ayub Khan's time, he was a general of the army. We had the 5-year plan, golden era of Pakistan. I lived in Pakistan during Musharraf's rule for about 2 years. And recently, in going into Pakistan, Pakistan is a lot worse than it was when Musharraf was around. Because the army is the only institution that actually works properly in Pakistan at the moment. What are your views, the whole panel, what are your views for a country that does not understand democracy properly? Is one-man rule is going to work there or not?
Okay. The lady with a scarf, please.
Yes, my name's Sue Wallace-Shaddad. I work for the British Council. We do a lot of work with Pakistan, both at sort of working with young people, with communities, with governments as well. And it's just sort of interest on my part was when you're working with diaspora here in UK, do you find... given those sort of 3 generations perhaps, do you find there's more work to be done with particular generations, or how do you find that interaction with diaspora? Is it affected by different generations? Is there a lot more to do with young diaspora here? I'd just be interested in your views on that.
Thank you. The chap with the grey sweatshirt, please.
I'd just like to make one point, and then I've got a question for Michael as well. My point being, when he said about ethnic minorities, especially to the gentleman back there, about Pakistan, British Pakistanis not doing well. Well, there was the question posed to the education minister, and he said that with ethnic minorities, British Indians are doing 10% above the national average, and British Pakistanis are doing 10% below the national average. So that clearly shows that uneducation came from Pakistan here, and they're still uneducated. So that needs to be dealt with first. I don't think it's anything to do with the British
Okay,
people.
thank you.
The question, sorry, can I just have a question to Michael? You said obviously 2.6% is spent on education, 2.6% spent on health. Obviously collectively that's 5.2%. Where's the rest of the GDP going? Could anybody possibly tell me that?
The military. Yeah. Michael, do you want to take the question that we've just answered?
Well, I think also remember tax collection is relatively low, so public expenditure is not such a big share of GDP, and then defence.
Okay. Rasul, Amina, do you want to come in on any of these points?
Sorry, I can't see you properly, but just to pick up on your point about the generations in the diaspora that we deal with, I have to say for the Citizens Foundation UK chapter, our supporters are made up of a lot of different types of people. It could be from the diaspora, you're looking at British Pakistanis, but there's actually quite a few. London's quite a transitory place. You find a lot of people from Pakistan who come to London for a few years, and then after a few years they leave. So that's one aspect of the people that we deal with. The ones that are British Pakistanis, I don't see it as a problem yet, but I do think that with every generation, there's going to be that distance from Pakistan, and I think interest will wane. So at this point, we still have first, second, maybe third generation Pakistanis who are still interested, who are still engaged with Pakistan, but I don't know if that'll be the case moving down 2 or 3 generations, because already this generation now, say the third generation, is very entrenched. They are very British Pakistani. They have Pakistani roots, but they're very entrenched in their Britishness in a sense. It's not at all a bad thing, but it does take them away. Most of them have never been to Pakistan. or have been maybe once on a small visit, didn't like it, came back. So I do think that'll make our work a little harder, because we'll have to go out there and tell them why it is so important for us. For us specifically, we just work in education, but why it's so important to focus on Pakistan as a country and to get that education, that critical mass of educated people in Pakistan, and why it's in the British interest as well, as Anwar has already mentioned.
Can I just answer this young man's question? I think the most important thing that we need in Pakistan is a good census. Until you don't have a clear census, you won't have a great vote. Okay, and I think the Pakistani population, whether they're educated, not educated, literate, not literate, they will all go and vote, like they have in a country like India. You know, whether you like it or not, they voted the most popular government out with the biggest reserves and everything because they got a chance to vote. Okay, and we will have the same situation, but I think you need to have a proper census. I think Musharraf started that. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if there's going to be a change of government or it's going to continue as the same government. I think that we'll only tell. The other question is about the second and third generation Pakistanis who are basically the British, they're English, okay? I'll give you an example of my daughter. I was sitting in Pakistan 2 years ago. She was 16 then. I called her up. I said, look, why don't you come on home and, it'll be really fun with you here. She said, but Dad, I'm already at home. And she was sitting here. So that's how they think. And I think that, we need to address these issues. She's obviously lives in London and she's, grown up here, so it's different. But the kids that are further up north, as you go further up north, as I said, the community is a lot more closer. It's a lot more controlled because of the way the system runs within our communities. So I think the whole idea, again, as I said, is a lot of these, I would assume that a lot of the children do have frustrations, but, we live in joint families, we stay together, so people are not expressing it, they become expressive going outside. Okay, I don't know if that's helped you. Yeah.
Razul?
Yeah, I think on that point of sort of interaction with the generations, as the generation gap sort of widens, I think I'd like to believe from experience and of course with a certain belief in humanity that given the humanitarian nature, and whenever there is a humanitarian nature, irrespective of where it is, people will respond. And I hope that, as this generation gap widens, and if this situation remains in Pakistan with this humanitarian issues that we face, that that the people, irrespective of whether they're Pakistani or not, will respond. I'd just like to very quickly, if you don't mind, Anwar, I'd just allude to the point about corruption. I think it's a very, perhaps it could be a generic misconception that obviously aid agencies and, are somehow part of that, or, that impression can be created. And I think it's important to clear up that misunderstanding, if it were. I mean, as Islamic Relief, and I'm sure I speak on behalf of other charities when I say that, we regard ourselves as critical friends of any governments or in any government that we work in. So when, where things are going wrong, we will point that out to them and we'll say to them that this is how we think. So in no way will we toe the line, because the funds that we raise is delivered through our offices. And that's something that we must understand, that aid agencies are not dependent on the government of a certain country. They have a mandate to work in the country that they're working in through the UN and the facilities that are, through the humanitarian agencies that are there. And we do not, and we are not dependent on any government.
Okay. I'm going to take the last two questions. Before I do, just very quickly, Sue, on the point I think it's important about diasporas and generations and segregation as well that's been raised. I think, firstly, those of us that are second generation and third generation have still inherited language skills, cultural skills, and knowledge that can be used. And the key thing here is it's in Britain's interests, for us as British citizens, to engage in South Asia in an ever-increasing globalised world. And frankly, I think we can learn some things from the Jewish diaspora and how they've engaged globally. And we should look at international relations and not shy away from it. We have had a cycle of alienation, segregation, some communities where, there's been issues around community cohesion, but also there's some brilliant people coming through university and college that are succeeding as well. And I think we've got a lot of work to do in some areas. And I come from a neighbourhood not different from where you're talking about. I grew up in Rusholme, and I'm from Longside. So I see all that stuff. I see all the gangster culture, the nihilism, the segregation, the alienation. You know, I see it within my own network and community back home. So I'm not ducking that issue, but we just got to keep moving on as well. Okay, can I just take the last two questions, please? Right. I'm going to take the chap here. And is there a question from a woman? It's been mainly men. So is there a woman that's going to put her hand up for a question? Okay, yeah, I've noted that, but I'd like to say, is there last chance for one last woman to ask a question? Lady there, and Nafis, we will take you in as well, so we've got three now. Let's start with the lady there.
I'm Bashan Rafiq, and I'm the chair for the UK All Pakistan Women's Association. It has been a very interesting panel. I have been taken up with all that you have said. When I grew up in Pakistan, we used to have shanty towns all over Karachi. It was the government of Pakistan, Ayub Khan and Azam Khan, one of his generals, who built up Korangi in 1 year and moved all the people from these shanty towns into this township without any aid, without any money. Today, Pakistan, with all this aid that comes in, with all the NGOs, with everything, cannot seem to just get its act together. I think there's somebody from the High Commission from here. Why have we not asked them? What is it that the government can do?
He will have his chance shortly.
Yes. I congratulate the Citizens Foundation, Islamic Aid, the Rangoon Foundation, and every foreign agency that gives us funding. But it seems Pakistan is being run by NGOs and not by Pakistan.
Okay. The gentleman there, then we're going to go to Nafis for the last question. So if we can move one mic to my right. Sir.
I think, first of all those who are the sponsors of that evening deserves a thank you. And all those who are the sponsors of that evening, I would like to request you, being dual nationality holder, let's give the respect of the two countries together. If we really need to help, first we are taking the Pakistan as a negative place and all these things. No, Pakistan is an independent country, and Pakistan has given lots of talents and all these things. But when approached by the outsides, it has always been with a negative sense. My question to the panel, you have put your time, efforts, and your skills. Thank you very much for thinking about the humanity. But named me a single country on this global map that has been run by the philanthropy and charity. We got to talk about the system. We got to talk about the skills. And what we have developed over here have to transfer into the countries according to their need and desire. May I invite you, like taking the responsibilities of dual nationality holders, let's bring the bridges and bring the people together if we want to help them. Thank you.
Okay. Nafis.
Thank you very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and the distinguished panelists here. It's really heartening to see that people worry about Pakistan. There's so much of concern about Pakistan in the hearts of the people who are sitting so far away from our country. Being a representative of Pakistan does not mean that I have the answers to all the questions which have been raised here. I don't have the recipe to address all the ills or the problems which are there in that country, or in my country for that matter. I believe that we have seen that country run by bureaucrats, that country run by military dictators, that country run by political elites, democratically so-called, democratically elected people. And also that country is full of NGOs, national NGOs and international NGOs. And everybody is putting their efforts, doing their bit. And I have grown up amidst these concerns that Pakistan is a failed state, Pakistan is full of corruption, the corruption is rife there, and it is going to go in a matter of years. But I think, mashallah, Pakistan, I believe you take into account the development or the distance it has traveled from 1947 to this place. I think we have done a pretty good job. It's not that we have been just going backwards. If that was the case, we would not have been existing here. And then everybody talks about corruption. Fine. Corruption is there. Corruption is everywhere, in every country. The extent and the level is different. When we talk about Pakistan, it's a matter of perception also, thanks to media, which is now very wild, I would say, and not really controlled as such. But I think you need to see the compulsions which Pakistan has, the difficulties which my country faces, your country faces, the surroundings which we have. You have to see the border situation in Pakistan, the geographic location of Pakistan. Everybody talks about, somebody just raised a question, 2.6 for health, 2.6 for education. Where's the rest of the money spent or GDP spent? Well, we also are under debt, huge debt. We do the debt repayment. And also, the defense of the country is definitely essential. If anybody says that we don't require defense, a strong defense, I don't think so. They live in the real world, because we have fought 3 wars. We have fought numerous other wars, which are not wars as such, territorial wars, but they are war, in a manner of speaking, a war on terror. Look at the amount what we have lost in the war on terror. Look at the steps we have taken, or backwardness which we have got after fighting 3 wars with India. I think this is not fair to just point out. I believe that the spirit which I have noted here is that there are people sitting here who are doing good job for Pakistan, like Islamic Relief, the people like TCF. I know TCF when it was born there. I know Mr. Atid Riaz, who is one of the founders. And I have worked for TCF myself as an individual, because I feel that I'm not just a government servant, but I'm also a citizen of Pakistan, and I have to work for that. I believe that we need to strengthen their hands. I don't think so we need more entities to be put in place there in Pakistan. We need to strengthen the hands of all those who are already involved in all these sectors. Like, we know where the problems lie. The education sector. There are numerous education foundations and NGOs working there in Pakistan. We need to just strengthen their hands. And this is where I'm coming from.
Okay. Thank you. Thank
you very much.
Thank you. I'm going to ask any panel members to respond to the last questions, and I'm going to wrap up quickly. So, starting with Michael.
When we were writing the book, we interviewed Bill Gates, so the largest philanthropist, richest man in the world, giving away $3 billion a year. And he said something rather strange. He said, the Gates Foundation is a tiny, tiny organization. And his point was that even with all that money, his resources were tiny compared to the problems he was trying to tackle. And this is, I think you're absolutely right, where people talk about the importance of politics, the importance of government. Yes, you will only be able to educate all the children in Pakistan, deal with the health issues with an effective government. What philanthropy has to be is a way of catalyzing that change. And that's why I contrast the philanthrocapitalistic approach to traditional charities. It's not about putting a sticking plaster. It's got to be about a strategic intervention that's looking to drive change by competing with the government and saying, you say this problem can't be fixed, we've found a solution. By funding efforts that are going to promote democracy, promote transparency, promote accountability. Different things to challenge and shift the system. Because it's got to be about leverage over the entire system, not just about doing a bit of good.
Russell?
I think it's important to understand that obviously these people that we talk of are in difficult situations and they need empowering. And I think what we need to do as communities who are concerned with the people of Pakistan and the situation that they are faced with is advocate on their behalf. So like Michael just alluded to, we need to pick areas that is of interest that we can have a common interest in and drive that forward. If we join as a community, as the British, whether it be Pakistan or the British community, those that care for Pakistan, I believe we have a strong platform here to make a positive contribution, a positive change towards Pakistan and in Pakistan. And I think that's the way we need to move forward. Because, just doing collective or individual rather bits and pieces here and there, we won't get far. What we need to do is now, come together, the different organizations, the different institutes, the different individuals, and share this collective platform and then move things forward, advocate on behalf of the people for them and get that change through our government, through the government of Pakistan and through other institutions. Thank you.
All I'd like to say is that I want all of you to visit the BPF website. Just take a look at what we're doing and in the future support us. We don't want any money from you. We just want you to be with us because I think it's important for the second and third generation Pakistanis who live in the UK. Thank you.
Amina.
I just want to say two things really quickly. One is, we could go on and on, keep talking about the corruption in Pakistan, etc. But for me, working in the education sector, I need to keep in mind that we are serving the poorest and we're serving children. And while we talk about all these things, we don't get currently we don't get any US aid or DFID aid. These are the kids, these are the people who are going to suffer. So at the moment, the way the situation in Pakistan is, we and other NGOs like us are needed. I do very much agree with Michael when he says that philanthropy can be that catalyst for change. So TCF has a long-term vision. We don't want to be hanging around forever. What we want is for the government to recognize that we have a template. We're much cheaper. Our education quality is much higher than the current government schools. Why not roll that out across the country?
Hugh.
Thanks to the last few speakers. I agree with a lot of what you said. I do think donors have got to get smarter. Actually, I think we need to get beyond doing things as they've always been done. I think it's got a lot to do with building the kinds of partnerships that go beyond this kind of top layer of people and organizations that we're dealing with. I think the quality of those relationships that is built between communities and people inside the country that are doing things to promote change and actors for change that have some money that they can concentrate in certain ways that will make a difference. I think the quality of those relationships are completely crucial. I think it takes time and effort to build them properly. But I do think in the end that is a very small role, and that the real job actually is up to the people of Pakistan themselves in the end.
I'm going to take 90 seconds to wrap up a few things very quickly. Firstly, thank you all for coming. You've been extraordinarily generous with your time. I'd also like to put on record thank you to Catherine Slocum and Nina Belensky from City and the RSA that have been superb in helping us organise all 4 events. John Pandit from Asian Dub Foundation, who's been advising and helping me organise this programme from the start, and Saeed Khalik, who's been extraordinarily generous with his time and his advice. I just want to say a few quick things about this programme, why we did it and how we've got here. And firstly, a very personal comment. From 2 years now of doing this work, I am absolutely convinced that until the Indian and Pakistani establishment stop looking at each other through the prism of the military, these problems will continue. And I say that as someone that has a deep love for Pakistan. And I hear it from the Indian side so often. And both sides suffered so much, and our ancestors, our grandparents, my parents as well, and neither nation will be truly free until we can both move on. And that's just a personal comment. We've done 4 events in this series. We had a launch by Baroness Saeeda Varsi on the relationship between Britain and Pakistan. We had a talk by Anatole Leven, Max Malik and Jahan Mahmood on British Pakistanis and citizenship. We've had an event around the media. With this evening, we've gone over 850 people attending 4 events. And I would just encourage people, we're going to be doing this again next year. Stay involved with the ED Foundation, Citizens Foundation, the work of Rangoonwala Foundation, BPF. And we are 1.2 million. The British Pakistani community is very, very big. We're very diverse. We need more people, more leaders, more women. And for the British Pakistani community to succeed as British citizens will help Pakistan succeed. Thank you all for your time. Khadafis.